What's up, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Budding Watch Enthusiast. On this channel, I review watches and discuss watches from the perspective of someone that has been collecting for very long. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing down below. Last week, I did a Q&A video, like a live Q&A, and one of the topics that I brought to the table was about the Jeannot controversy that kind of rocked the watch world last week. And from that topic, I briefly talked about homages and used that topic as kind of like a springboard to briefly discuss the difference between homage and fakes and what's behind that. And I remarked that I'd never done a video discussing homage watches. The reason I never did is because I didn't feel like that I had a whole lot more to add to the discussion besides just my take on them. And there's tons of videos out there. And then, so I was going to leave it alone. And then when I was trying to figure out what topic that I wanted to talk about for this week's video, or what I wanted to do for this week's video, I kept thinking about homage watches. And so we're going to talk about homage watches today. And so it's not necessarily, like, I'm going to obviously tell you what I think about them, but the thing that kept kind of sticking with me about homages is I kind of hate how that term can sometimes be used by some enthusiasts out there, because I think that the view that some folks have on homages can be a bit ridiculous in terms of how it's defined and then how that definition is wielded. So I guess we should probably start with kind of defining homage from my perspective. And for me, for a watch to be considered an homage watch, it has to be a watch that very obviously, very deliberately, basically mimics a famous reference. So like a good example of this would be like the Helson Watch Company Sharkmaster 300, an obvious homage to the Omega Seamaster 300s of the 1960s, or a lot of watches that Steinart comes out with, like they have, their Ocean One, that I believe it's called, that mimics the Steve McQueen Rolex Explorer 2. And those are homages because, like I said, that's a company that is taking that design, that is making a watch that is, again, deliberately made to look like that watch. That is the intent that they're going for, and that's what they're trying to do. So to me, that's an homage. And like I said, that's the only thing that's an homage. I have a pretty strict definition compared to a lot of watch enthusiasts out there. There's a lot of folks whose definition of homage kind of basically says, hey, if you take 2 or 3 design elements of a known watch, then, you're making an homage to this other watch. And I just find that definition a little bit ridiculous. And again, it's just my opinion, but in any other industry where design is part of the equation, that's not really talked about that way, right? Like if you look at tech or video games or tabletop games, these are 3 industries that I have a keen interest in, for various reasons as well. Nobody calls Sonic the Hedgehog an homage to Super Mario Brothers, even though Sonic obviously has Mario DNA in it, because it's a different thing. Like it's taking the platforming element of a Super Mario Brothers game, it's taking the side-scrolling elements of a Super Mario Brothers game, and it's adding other stuff to it as well to make it its own unique thing. There's no gamer in their right mind that would say Sonic is just a cheap Mario homage or a cheap Mario knockoff. That's a silly sentiment. And so, like I said, that's why that equation of borrowing a couple design elements just doesn't make sense to me. Now, I know what you're saying. It's just someone's opinion. Why do you care that much? Well, the reason that it bugs me is because when you go on, like watch forums or Facebook, or if you watch YouTube videos for watches that, take these design elements, that borrow some design elements from other watches, inevitably in the comments or somewhere down below, you'll find someone that's dismissing that watch out of hand merely because they're classifying it as an homage. And that's another thing I don't really understand either. I don't understand the dismissing of a watch just because it has similarities to another watch. Best example I can think of, there's some folks out there that will take like the NTH Nakin, for example, a watch that I own, and they'll dismiss it out of hand because, it's a Tudor homage, it's a Tudor Submariner homage, it's not, who cares? It's a cheap Tudor knockoff. And that's silly to me, just because they borrow the snowflake hands, they borrow the snowflake markers, just because of that, now it's a Tudor knockoff because, you know, the NTH decided to take two prominent elements of a watch and then insert it on their watch. That doesn't make any sense. Like, it's one thing if NTH came out with a watch that very explicitly was designed in all facets like that Tudor sub, but there's tons of design elements on the NTH watches that are different. You know, the Tudor Submariners have a traditional aluminum bezel, the NTH has brushed steel. You know, the NTH ones have a loomed crown, you know, an etched loomed crown that the Tudor ones certainly don't have. Again, that's NTH taking, you know, obviously when they designed the Nakin, they had the Tudor Submariner in mind, and it was used as kind of a jumping off point, but it's still its own watch. And what's funny too, when it boils down to those discussions, I feel like as enthusiasts, we sometimes get caught up in the romantic element of the hobby. And I'm not saying that that's not important, by the way, because the romanticizing of watches is why all of us are here. Like, it's the reason that you guys are watching this video of me talking for 10 minutes about Homage watches. You wouldn't do that if you didn't have, you know, some love on a greater level than just the nuts and bolts of a watch, for sure. But when we're criticizing, you know, NTH for borrowing design elements from Tudor, we forget sometimes that it is a watch. Like, it is a piece of equipment that is used for the purpose of telling time. And it's funny because if you were to take those two watches and you were to strip the branding off of them and just compare them pound for pound, the NTH is probably coming out ahead as the better watch than a 70s Snowflake Tudor Submariner. And of course it's going to. Like, it has the benefit of being, you know, not 45 years old, of having the benefits of, you know, the advancements in watch technology that we've gotten to make over the years, and having sapphire glass, and having, you know, arguably having a better material for the bezel. And again, just not being a watch that's subjected to 45 years of wear. So what makes the Tudor better than the NTH sub? Well, it's the romantic side of it. And it's you know, it's the history, it's the brand of Tudor. It's the fact that it, you know, it was a military issue, the Snowflake sub, so it's got that history behind it as well. The romantic elements are what make it desirable. So it's just, like I said, that's why it's silly that that term homage is used by many enthusiasts as a derogatory term or as a dismissive term, because it just doesn't make sense to me that you look at it that way. And I think too that not enough is made about the useful place that homage watches do actually have in the hobby. And I'm not talking about broad definition homages. I'm talking about my strict definition of homages as well. Because again, it to me, it boils down back to what the product actually is that you're buying. So let's say that you're someone who, again, I talked about the Helson Sharkmaster. Let's say you're someone who has a real affinity for the style and the aesthetic of those 60s Seamaster 300s. But let's also say that you're someone of, you know, more limited means, that you don't have the time or the experience or the money to go out and source and find a Seamaster 300 that's still in really good condition, you know, that hasn't been beaten down by time, that the movement is still running really well. That's not an easy thing to do. And in the meantime, you can go to Helson, you can get this watch that, again, is a modern watch. It's, you know, it's the beneficiary of the modern technologies, and you're getting it for a fraction of the price. And that watch is going to be a quality watch. It's going to be durable. You're going to be able to wear it every day. Why is that a problem? Like, and more importantly, in terms of the, you know, the folks going online and dismissing it or shaming it because it's a homage watch, why should the person that buy that watch feel ashamed to own that watch? If I had a Sharkmaster 300, I'd wear it every day. I wouldn't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me. It's not like I feel some sense of, you know, of imposter syndrome if I look down on my wrist and it's not a real Seamaster. It says Helson on the dial. I know it's a Helson watch. It says Sharkmaster on the dial. I know it's not a Seamaster. I get that it's a watch that is purposely, you know, aping a watch from before. And I'm not saying this to say that there's not legitimate reasons to not buy homage watches, by the way. There's a ton of legitimate reasons not to. And the one that I hear the most often, and probably the one that I most identify with, and the one that probably has kept me from ever buying like a straight homage, is the fact that, you know, why would I buy this watch, you know, that's just using an established design, that's just using, you know, the designer's not taking any creative liberty, creative license. So why would I buy this watch when I can buy a slew of other watches that have original designs, that are doing something new, that kind of feel more personal, that kind of speak to me more, rather than someone that's just using a established design. And that's a totally valid reason why. But I would then hope that you wouldn't then again be dismissive of that watch just because you happen to not desire to own it. I don't think there's any problem with having these watches out there. The Rolex Submariner 6538, the original James Bond sub, is my absolute favorite Rolex Submariner reference. It's very unlikely. It's like a 1 in many millions chance that I'll ever have the opportunity to own one in my life, just because the prices for those in good condition are astronomical at this point. So if I ever came across like a Mark II Kingston, a watch that is a very blatant homage to that 6538 Submariner, I would absolutely, if I could get that for a reasonable price, are you kidding me? I would absolutely buy that watch, no problem, because like I said, it's giving me a chance to kind of experience a watch that I would never otherwise be able to. And it doesn't matter to me that it wouldn't say Rolex on the dial, because the reason I like that watch is because of how it's designed. It's not necessarily tied to the Rolex aspect of it. And look, I know the reason that a lot of folks say those comments online, especially something they would probably never say to your face, is because, the internet emboldens you, having anonymity emboldens you to make, comments like that you might not normally make. And I get all that. And I'm also not saying that that's a majority of people either. I know the vast majority of folks out there, even if you don't care for homage watches, are not going to go on and trash a watch merely because it is an homage. But when it comes to homages, that aspect of it just really sticks in my craw, because watches should be a positive hobby. There's a lot of terrible things that are happening in the world today, and that will continue happening in the world today, that we don't need to bring that sense of negativity into something that we're doing because we all enjoy doing. So like I said, if you're someone that doesn't enjoy homage watches, then that's cool. There's thousands and thousands of watches for you out there. And again, if you're someone that really pines for some of these famous references, but you'll never be able to afford them, then I think that's the real positive aspect that the homage market brings. It's just, again, being able to experience these things in a sense, right, that you might not normally be able to experience them if what it is that you enjoy about those watches is their design and is their aesthetic. And look, if you want to define an homage watch as a watch that borrows 2 or 3 elements, from another watch, that's your prerogative. But again, I don't think that that's a negative thing either. There's only so many ways to skin a cat at this point, right? So, I mean, there's going to be overlap in design across a wide variety of watches. And I think what's more important, especially when you're buying a modern watch, is pay more attention to the watch itself. Pay more attention to the company that you're buying from, to the materials that are being used, and to the durability of that watch. Don't dismiss a watch just out of hand and out of sight because it's a dive watch that, happens to use a Mercedes handset, because there's going to be tons of them out there that do. Look, I normally ask you guys to put your thoughts in the comments below. I don't even think I need to ask that question for this video, because I know this topic tends to be one that people love to sound off on and love to have an opinion on. So by all means, have at it down there. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Give me a thumb if you liked it. Click the red subscribe button and ring the bell icon if you loved it. And I'll see you all the next time.